Okay. Good evening, everyone. It's 8 o'clock here in London. We are about to start our live chat, our live interview with just allow people to connect. Excellent. I see the first people connecting. We're about to start the chat, but I'm just going to give some time to people to connect. For the one who are connected, if you have the possibility, and you could please write a message in the comment from whichever platform you're following us, just to let me know if you can see me and hear me well, please. That would be great. Thank you. So our top guest today is Lars Avemarie, last but not least of our series of chat interviews that started back in October with Eunice. And we had this series of interviews that have been there fortnightly. So just wanted to thank you all for listening to them, for being there with us, for asking questions, for interacting with us. Because without you, this would not be possible, of course. So this is the last chat of the year of 2020, but we'll be starting again a new series at the beginning of the following year. So I see few people are connecting. So I'm going soon to introduce our top guest today. I hear Ashish saying that is connecting from India at 1:30 a.m. So thank you very much, Ashish. That's really a great commitment. It's already a big commitment to join the chats at 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. on a Saturday night, and you're doing it from 1:30 a.m. So thank you very much for being there. So I'm going to add shortly our top guest today. That is Lars Avemarie. Is a Danish physiotherapist, writer, and is internationally acclaimed lecturer, teacher, and personal trainer as well. And I'm going to add him now. Hello, Lars. Good evening.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you very much for being here today with us.
My pleasure.
I remind all the listeners and the viewers, I see people connecting from India, from US, Wisconsin as well, so from all over the world, to please, if you have any questions at any point of the chat, to write it down, and I will ask it to Lars as well. So you will have the possibility to ask questions and interact. So Lars, I would say for the one who don't know you, or don't follow you on the social media, don't know who you are, could you please tell us a little bit more about you and what you do? Thank you.
Yeah, so basically I've worked in the health industry since 2006, and I've worked in multiple roles. I've worked as a fitness instructor, a receptionist, a gym class instructor, a mid-level manager. And the last part of my work in the fitness industry were as a personal trainer, specializing in exercising with people who have chronic pain. And this I did all before I went to the university to take my bachelor's degree in physiotherapy. And currently I work full-time in sub-regional rehabilitation as a physiotherapist. And then, like you mentioned before, on the side, I teach a weekend course that tries to reimagine and reconceptualize pain rehabilitation according to current pain research. And in my work, I clinically see a lot of different people with different diseases, people with mostly with chronic diseases, different chronic diseases. But I also see people with hip fractures, foot fractures, pelvic fractures, femoral or humerus fractures, also pain patients, of course. And most of my patients are in the second half of their life. And by default, they sort of, to this way the system is set up in Sweden, they should have several limitations in their physical function before they see me. That's sort of a prerequisite for them to coming to me in the system that is in Sweden. So that's a bit about me.
So you have a unique blend of experience from different profession, different perspective, and a way of approaching people. What pushed you, if I may ask, to become a physiotherapist?
So basically, when I was working in the fitness industry, I was the senior trainer in the place where I worked. So when people came who had an old injury or had pain or had some that required a bit more knowledge of the body, then they were often referred to me. And after doing this for some years in Denmark in a corporate gym, and then doing the same stuff as a self-employed personal trainer in Sweden for some years, then actually my teacher actually recommended me. So he basically said, "Well, Lars, you are in this ballpark. You are doing a lot of this stuff already. You are training a lot with people with chronic pain, and you're using a lot of this new knowledge we have of chronic pain. Why don't you get educated as a physiotherapist?" And at this point, I had been reading primarily research literature on the subject of pain and exercise science for the last 5 to 6 years. So basically, I started in reverse. Basically, you start at university and you get knowledge of anatomy and physiology, and then you end up reading research when you do your bachelor's. This is the way it's done both in Sweden and in Denmark, at least. So, but basically, I started in reverse because I started reading a lot of research, and then after that, I applied for physio school.
So I bet you knew a lot already more on the topic than your colleagues and probably of your professor as well, right?
Yeah, to some extent. Regarding pain, definitely.
So you have a very, very interesting and well-done website, and I encourage all the listeners to have a look at it if they don't know it yet, in which you write a lot of very interesting blog posts. There is one in particular that I read that I really like, and is 20 unpopular opinion that you wrote a few years ago, actually, but is still very actual. And I wanted to explore some of that point with you. The point number 2, you state that most health professionals lack of a comprehensive scientific perspective on pain and are often scientific illiterate. So why do you think this happens? First of all, that's the first questions. And then second, what do you think can be done to improve this?
Yeah. So the reason basically it happens is actually perfectly stated by Bridge et al. And Bridge et al. They state that the hours of pain education is woefully inadequate given the prevalence and burden of pain. And they actually also state that published criteria for pain education has been available for 20 years, but are rarely employed. So basically, we know a lot about pain, but it's not really taught. So basically, and this is not only a problem in physiotherapy, this is a problem in the whole medical field. So basically, Briggs also found that pain education accounted for less than 1% of program hours for some disciplines. So 1% of our teaching, medical teaching, goes to the topic of pain. And this is a really, really big problem. And as stated by Thompson et al., that's a newer review where they looked at all of a global view of education about pain in the health professions. They found that there were problems with the education we get surrounding pain, and it's across the whole world, in the States, in Canada, and in Europe. So to answer your question, basically, as long as the status is this, that we actually don't learn about pain, then health professionals will not have a comprehensive scientific perspective on pain. So basically, the way we are taught about pain is we are taught about pain a little in anatomy class, with breaking points of bones and stuff like that, tissues and stuff like that. And then we are taught maybe a bit about pain transmission in physiology class, which is basically already there's problems, because we have nociceptive fibers, we don't have pain fibers. So basically, the status quo, in my view, the status quo will not change as long as our education is as it is. And what I think we could do is to actually to recommend, or the best thing we can do to improve this is basically we have to basically teach ourselves, or we could go to some continuing education course, an evidence-based course, like from I know Joe Niels, he does courses. Peter O'Sullivan does courses. I know Professor Mosley does courses. I know I would recommend Adam Meakin's course, or it could be Ben Cormack's course, or one of those courses I would recommend. But as to recommend any CE course is problematic, because I really feel that the standard of many of the courses that are being provided to physiotherapists are of way too low standard. So, but the people I recommended earlier, I can vouch for personally.
Yeah. No, you are right. There is not enough time dedicated at university for those the topic of pain or pain neuroscience education. I graduated in 2013 in Italy, in a big university as well, and I don't have any memory of the word pain neuroscience education. I don't remember anyone spending not even 5 minutes on the topic of education, pain neuroscience education, or pain in general. And actually, I would be very interested from the listeners, consider they come from different parts of the world, to write maybe in the comments if those topics that Lars has just mentioned are taught or mentioned at their university. And another thing, Lars, I've realized is that, yes, maybe they mention the biopsychosocial model of care as a way of approaching pain, but then they don't teach you how to manage the person within the biopsychosocial model of care. So I've seen a lot of colleagues, they end up, being very good in the biological part of the model, and then maybe being good at gathering information about the psychological and the social part, but they don't have the tools to address it. And I think that is another problem. Don't you think so?
Yeah, I definitely think so. So there's a lot of talk about the biopsychosocial model, and it's almost become a sort of a fashion trend in the physio realm to talk about the biopsychosocial model. And it's the biopsychosocial model's popularity have sort of become its own problem, because now people are talking so much about it, but nobody knows what it actually is. So my experience is the same, that people talk about the biopsychosocial model and they talk about the theory, but when you then see what they are doing with their patients, then it's not biopsychosocial in any way. I would actually I make a claim in my course and make the point that we are not even good at thoroughly examining the biofactors. even thoroughly examining the biofactors we don't do. We totally miss out smoking. We totally miss out sleep. We totally miss out diet.
Yeah.
And those are huge biofactors. And those
Huge.
are within the biofactor realm. And then we totally miss out on the social and psychological factors.
Absolutely, like mental health red flags, sorry.
Yeah.
Point that things that we as physio don't have the knowledge or the education to do it. It's a point because we have to teach ourselves for through other courses, spending other money, and for the people that maybe don't speak English as well, that becomes much difficult to access to certain type of knowledge.
Yeah. But I really, in my heart, feel that we can learn this. So a lot of the stuff we learn at university is highly complex.
Yeah.
So learning anatomy is not easy. Learning physiology is not easy. And it's not easy to learn a lot of the stuff we have to learn at university. So I really feel that if we can learn this, then we clearly also can learn the other stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm reading some comments as we speak. They are saying, some of them are saying just 15 minutes of pain neuroscience education has been made. And there is another listener, Adam, saying that instead they had several weeks, and that's very nice to hear in both the entry level and postgrad. So that's very nice to hear.
Yeah.
So moving to the next questions, always regarding the same blog post you wrote, I'm referring to the point number 9. I'm going to read it as you wrote it because it's very well written. You write, pain felt in the body is not a thing, but many therapeutic modalities have conceptualized pain as something in the body, like a kidney or a patella. Pain is not a somatic entity. This erroneous belief leads the therapist to try and attack this thing called pain, forgetting that it is an experience, moving away from the core mechanicistic approach to pain, manual therapy, exercise therapy. Which skills does the modern physio need to master the better tackle? Which kind of skills do you think the modern physio need to better tackle the experience of pain compared to the one that we already have?
Yeah, so basically that's actually the sort of the subtopic of my whole course. So normally it takes me a whole weekend to try to explain this. So basically how I feel that we need to reimagine and reconceptualize what we do with people with pain. And we first and foremost, we need to accept complexity and uncertainty.
Yeah.
So we work with people that think for themselves and they behave based on those beliefs they have. So human behavior is complex by default. But sadly, our clinical narrative that we learn in the university often puts limits and restraints actually on our ability to imagine doing something different with people. So when I talk with a lot of physios, particularly in Denmark or in Sweden, then when I talk with them and they sort of get that I'm highly critical of a lot of the stuff that is being done in physiotherapy, then they jump to the conclusion that everything I do with patients is talk with them and then make them move. And there's so much more we can do, but because we're not taught this stuff, then the default setting is, okay, if we can't put our hands on people, which we can, if we can't do that, and if we can't think that we should correct their dysfunctional movement, then we end up being a low-paid psychologist. And that's not in any way what I'm describing. I think physios are in a very unique position to help people with chronic pain, because more often than not, pain is linked to something relative to a position or with movement. So basically, it's something that has to do with movement, and it has to do with either movement or avoidance of movement. And then we as physios are a movement specialist, but we should be not only focused on looking at movement from a perspective as it's not something to do with the person, but we should accept complexity and movement as something complex also.
Yeah. So we should is actually a brilliant point. We should accept complexity, and then the tools we have for managing this complexity is actually are basic things, because at the end we don't have to look for complex answers to complex questions. We don't have to go and check where a vertebra is moving less or if the fascia is not moving right. The answer to these complexities are most of the times are within the lifestyle factor of the person. As you said, how much they sleep, what they eat, how much movement they do, how they manage their stress level. But yes, it's complex to do this because there are a lot of uncertainties, and historically, as human beings, we don't cope very well with uncertainties. So I think we tend to fall a lot into models of treatment that gives us certainties.
Yeah, and that's also a huge problem. So basically, at university, or at least part of my courses, the physio parts, we are spoon-fed that we shouldn't be certain about a diagnosis. And that's actually the reversed thing of what we should be doing. We should accept that there's a high degree of uncertainty. But when you are all the time being promoted that you must be certain, then nobody wants to have this uncertainty. But we need to accept uncertainty. So it's basically we need to relearn or unlearn what we actually have learned. Another point, and you mentioned it a bit, I feel we need to abandon this search for these magical quick fix solutions to complex multifactorial problems. And we really need to start using this goldmine of research-based knowledge that we have right now. We're not 30 years back where we didn't know a lot. We know a lot now. Of course, there's a lot we don't know still, but we still know a lot more than we knew 30 years ago. And it's really time to use this knowledge, this research-based knowledge that we have. And really, and I have posted about this multiple times on social media, using evidence is the most humanistic act we can do. And this was noted by Jules Rothstein in an editorial. He was the chief editor of the American Physiotherapy Association's journal. And then I feel we need really to stop recycling the errors of the past generations. So basically, we can learn a lot from the past generations, but we should also feel that we should build upon what they have taught us. But we can not only learn from what they got right, but we could actually also learn from what they got wrong.
You raised two very good points. One, I will start with the last one, is about the most humanistic way we can do is following science and evidence. And it's fun you say that, because I totally agree with you, but there is a huge amount of therapists or professionals out there that they think that if you follow too much what evidence says, you lack of humanity. You become like, a sterile therapist only guided by papers. While instead, if you do things that maybe are not so scientific, but are what the patient likes, you are, for some bizarre reason that I don't understand, more human. That's at least what I hear in my country. I don't know if you have found the same issue.
Yeah, but also that's also a misunderstanding. So basically, when we talk about research, some people, or when I talk about research, some people often totally misunderstand what I'm talking about research, meaning that I only talk about quantitative research, not qualitative research. But I think when it comes to pain, there's a large degree of value in the qualitative research also. Basically, people share their lived experience with pain, their thoughts, their beliefs, their fears. And so what I'm proposing is we should use both qualitative and quantitative research. And research is not only about reading randomized controlled trials. There's also research on patient-client communication. There's research on shared decision-making. There's research on therapeutic alliance. There's actually a lot of research on the old, more Arcadian values that physiotherapy always have got, meaning the soft skills. We work with people. So actually, we could say that the new old view that a physio is somebody who fixes dysfunctions and fixes the body, that's not evidence-based. But the old skills, working with people, guiding them, listening to them, all the soft skills that many of the past generations had, those are becoming more and more evidence-based. Just the mere fact that we actually could, the proper choice of a word can have an influence. What words you use can have an influence on patients. Makes all of a sudden the old ways of really being good at communication a lot of value. And actually, as noted in a new paper by Lin and Professor Sullivan, we need to refocus from technical skills and to find back to our roots, being experts in soft skills, being experts at working with people, not only doing something to another person, but working with them.
I think that is so true, so important, at the same time so difficult to put in place,
Yeah.
but so important to do. And going a second back to the point you raised before about embracing uncertainties, I think this is something, a message I wanted to share with, to deliver to all my colleagues, especially the young ones that just graduated recently, that I think we have to make the patients aware of these uncertainties as well, especially when you work with complex patients, like you work with Lars, chronic pain patients or patients with long-standing conditions, that we don't necessarily have the answer, or we don't necessarily know 100% what is going to happen. And I think that helping them to be comfortable not knowing exactly what may happen or what may not happen is part of the therapeutic process as well. But sometimes what I see in physio is that we feel this pressure, we put ourselves on our shoulder to tell the patients with 100% certainty what is going on, and then to fix it ourselves. And that leads to burnout that is very common among us.
Yeah. Also, I think either it was Dr. Gregory Lehman, or it was Professor Sullivan, who shared some time ago a story on Twitter that actually being uncertain often leads to the patient feeling that certainty is the solution to their problem. But we actually need to attack that up front, because just because you're not certain doesn't mean you can't help the person. You can. So it's not, but many patients still feel we need to find a problem and then we can fix the problem. But the problem is if we can't really, if we are critical, we can't find a problem, but we can still help them. And we can help them even if we are not totally certain about the nature of the problem. We can still work with them. We can still help them. We can still guide them.
Yeah. That's very, very important point. Very important. And in another point you raise always in your blog post, and I'm referring to the point number 12, you say that a problem in pain management right now, you wrote this a few years ago, but I think that it still is a problem now, is that there is an epidemic of bad reasoning, of bad clinical reasoning. This is a pandemic, as you write, of bro science and non-scientific thinking and disrationalia. Sorry, I cannot pronounce it. Disrationalia. In debates, when people are faced with an argument and or evidence that goes against their belief, the common answer is, but I know it works, or I've seen it work. So my question is, critical thinking and critical reasoning is something that I think cannot be learned only and fully at university or in your mature age. I think, this is my opinion, of course, it's a process that has to begin at a young age. What would you recommend our colleagues, especially the younger ones, to better develop critical thinking in our profession?
Yeah, so a popular game is the devil's advocate. But I state that the devil's advocate is a game best played on yourself. So basically, you need to play devil's advocate on yourself a lot. So like you said, sadly, we don't really learn about critical thinking at university. Actually, there's a great paper that I'm going to cite here later by Sharples et al. It's an editorial, and he actually mentioned that we should actually learn critical thinking at an early age because it's much easier to learn back then. And when we get older, it's more problematic. I don't think it's impossible, but it's more problematic. And our also mentioned by Sharples et al. He also mentions that our health practitioner education or our education at university is mainly focused on memorization rather than thinking skills and reasoning skills. So basically, anatomy is a great example. That's just learn the muscles, their names, and where they are located and what they do, and the innovation and the different stuffs about the basic anatomy. And that's basically, this is it, learn it, memorize it. Then we can talk about the exercise science part another time. That's a whole different, you can be very good at anatomy, but you can't actually be good at exercise science. That's another thing. But we learn a lot of stuff that is really just about memorizing stuff, but we should really take a path to learn more about thinking. And really, there's a great deal of work from Professor Stanleyvich, who's a cognitive scientist. He has written some quite good books, but he states in an editorial that decades of research has shown that humans are so-called cognitive missers. So when we approach a problem, our natural default is to tap into the least tiring cognitive process. Typically, this is what psychologists call type 1 thinking. And type 1 thinking is basically reflective, automated, intuitive thinking. It's basically reacting on our gut feelings. And it's not really tiring. And this is our default. And it's actually important to note that most diagnostic errors are often caused by biases linked to this system 1 thinking, the non-analytical intuitive thinking.
Yeah, I think is crucial. As you said, probably one of the reasons is that because of all the topics, subjects we study at university, we just learn to memorize things by heart, to learn things by heart, like
Yeah,
physiology, anatomy, and very little we learn how to question ourselves and why we do certain things, and that's why I think that is, again, my personal opinion. Reading and studying philosophy from an early age does help
yeah,
this process of critical thinking, because how do you get it otherwise?
yeah,
How do
yeah,
you get this habit of questioning your beliefs and your
yeah.
ideas?
That's really hard. But I think the first, as to get back to your question, what we can do, then I think we should escape our belief in ourselves, our firm belief in ourselves. So Bates et al. He talks about there's 4 stages of consciousness in learning. So the first stage, or bottom stage, is unconscious incompetent. So basically, you're crap and you don't know it. Then we have stage 2, that's consciously incompetent, meaning that you are crap, but you know you're crap. Then you're consciously competent, you're good and you know you're good. And then there's the final stage, which actually should be the sort of the goal. That is actually your unconscious competent, meaning that by default you greet the person the right way. By default you extract the patient's agenda. By default you talk about sleep, and you don't only talk about issues with tissues, but you actually talk and get a good therapeutic connection with the person in front of you. So all those become sort of not automated, but they become skills that you can do without thinking so much about them. But really to become better at critical thinking and better at clinical reasoning, we have to escape the first step, meaning the first level. That's the unconscious incompetent, where you're crap, but you actually don't know you're crap.
But then there is even the level of the Dunning-Kruger effect, that
Yeah,
you're crap, but you think you're God.
yeah, exactly. That's another
And
problem.
lots of us as physios,
Yeah,
and myself as well, we fall into that, and is very dangerous.
yeah,
I think about all the colleagues that they do stuff and they think they're God and fix people, and is dangerous. It can be
yeah,
very dangerous.
yeah. Another way of looking at it is that we actually need to escape what is called the bias, meaning in the research this is called the bias blind spot. And the bias blind spot is the human nature to view all others as being biased, but not ourselves being biased.
Yeah.
And that's the bias blind spot. And that's it's also called a meta bias, because it's a bias embedded within all biases. And that's actually the biggest bias in of itself. That's the belief that if anybody disagrees with me, that's of course because they are biased, because I'm not biased myself. And that's the bias.
Yeah.
And basically we have to escape this thinking that we are right if we don't know it. And we have to escape the idea that other people are biased, but we are not. And the important thing is not that. The important thing is to recognize that we are biased, but the most important thing is what we do to try to combat this bias that are embedded within us. Bias is not something some people are, some people are not. We are all biased by default. All humans are biased. Sometimes in debates on social media, I get accused of being biased, and that's a typical personal accusation that you can get. But the funny thing is, actually, people are just they're accusing me of being human.
Yeah.
Being biased is a normal human trait. So basically, they're just stating that you're human, and they are at least as biased as I am. We are all biased all the time. It's what we do with our executive function to combat this bias that's important.
It's so important and fundamental, not only, of course, helping clients, but in our life, for everything. And so if a young student or a professional approach you for mentorship and ask you, how can I, improve my critical thinking, my critical reasoning, how can I be more aware of my biases, what would you recommend them? Is there anything, not a recipe because we don't like that term, something specific you'd recommend to follow to develop more awareness?
Yeah, so basically, what I would recommend to them is starting with what is called metacognitive surveillance, meaning that you're thinking about your thinking and your reasoning in order to make your thinking better and of higher quality. So back in my Pain Cloud lecture in 2018, I talked about how to detoxify your clinical reasoning process. And I talked about 2 simple rules for joining critical thinking club. And the first rule is that you must not automatically assume that people are logically reasoning individuals. And the second step and second rule to join critical thinking club is that you must not automatically assume that you are a logical reasoning individual. So basically, you should start at the biggest, or actually one of the most important things about critical thinking is asking questions. And not only asking questions that are biased towards you being right, but actually asking questions that are biased towards you being wrong. So again, you should try to sort of play the devil's advocate game on yourself. You should not ask what is right. You should ask what is wrong. You should actually try to refute your own ideas to find out how good they are. But many people, you can see it in different debates. All of the questions they ask are confirmatory towards their preconceived beliefs. So they are only asking questions to get yes answers. But science is not trying to get yes answers. Having a scientific mindset is going for the no answer. That's part of the null hypothesis. So basically, if you have information and I want information, then I can't only ask questions that you can say yes to. I should also ask questions that you can say no to. So I should not only try to confirm your idea, I should also try to refute your idea. And often I will get more information from refuting your idea than from just confirming it.
It's so difficult, though, eh?
Yeah, really, really, really difficult.
It's so difficult.
Yeah.
Of course, we make it easy now when we speak about it, but when in practice, I think is a lifetime journey.
Yeah.
It's a lifetime.
Yeah, a tip I normally use on myself is that when there's strong emotions involved, then I need to fact check myself. So if I feel that, oh, this is really, I'm really right here. The other guy is an idiot. I know I'm right. If I haven't fact checked myself and actually have some sort of proof from the scientific literature that I'm right, then I need to fact check myself. But it could also be the other way around. I could be dead certain that something is that some other guy is that I'm that some guy is wrong or some guy is right. If I have either a strong feeling of positivity or negativity, that is sort of a warning sign. So I need to fact check myself. If I have strong feeling that this guy is right, that's a problem. If I have strong feelings that this guy is wrong, that's also a problem. Then I need to fact check myself if I haven't done it already. If I have a good foundational understanding of the research literature and I have looked at both sides of the question, then I can say, because I have proof on it, that, well, actually he's wrong on this part, because we know from this, and this research that what he's stating is wrong. But then I have a foundation of understanding based on research, based on objective evidence, not only feelings that I'm right or wrong.
This is fantastic, Lars. Thank you very much for this.
You're welcome.
And there is actually a very good questions coming from one of our listener, Adams. I'm going to put it on the screen and then I'm going to read it aloud for the people that are just listening to us and not viewing us. So Adam is asking, all or none thinking has plagued our traditional PT education for a long time.
Yeah.
Everyone needs manual therapy. Every MCL needs the same treatment. Do you think there are any all or none biases that are being created as pain neuroscience develops? For example, people arguing that no one needs hands-on, everyone with greater pain than 6 weeks should be given a graded exposure approach, etc. How would you recommend clinical reasoning could help us bridge the gap? I think it's a fantastic question.
Yeah, very good question. So I would sort of, instead of trying to combat this idea of all or none or black and white thinking, which we have a sort of a tendency to be simplistic thinking. We have a tendency to be that. Like Stanovich said earlier, we really try to solve our problems with the least tiring cognitive task. So basically, the most simple, least tiring solution to a problem we will choose. But in our field of medical science, there are no simple questions or simple patients. So basically, I would reverse or redirect the focus towards patient-centered care. And patient-centered care means that the patient in front of you is unique, and this unique patient needs a unique approach. Meaning that I made a post some time ago that actually patient-centered clinician should be like a chameleon. He should actually change his approach according to the patient. So basically, actually, the patient's needs, goals, and their presentation actually dictates our approach to them and our advice for possible options and solutions. So we should actually try to, instead of this all needs manual therapy, all needs kinesiotape, all needs acupuncture, all needs some magical trick, we should actually try to totally refocus towards providing patient-centered care, or people-centered care, as it's also referred to. And that requires a unique approach, meaning that and actually O'Sullivan had a great paper on this 1-2 years ago, on even people with low back pain, where the pain location is the same place, can have very diverse representations. So we can't just think that, okay, he has pain in the same place, then we treat him like the other guy we had yesterday with low back pain also. No, they can be totally different regarding their beliefs and their causes. So basically it could be one of my colleagues had a guy with the low back pain, and basically he worked a place where they changed big tires for trucks, and that's pretty hard manual labor. And a lot of these people there, they had in between they had some problems, or not problems, they had pain in the back, but it was normal. It was not really something that you talked much about, because it was a normal part of doing this work. And then you can have a guy coming in, as actually a guy, one of my students actually had, who actually felt that he, after a while, he actually felt that, well, actually, I've been saying to myself that I inherited my dad's bad back. So my dad always had a bad back, and I have been saying to myself that he has passed on this bad back syndrome to me, and that's why I have back pain and problems with my back, because I have inherited his bad back. And that was a saying he had been saying to himself years after years. And that's really something you have to be a very skilled communicator and a skilled therapist to sort of find out that. And also you have to have a very solid therapeutic alliance for the patients in the first place to feel close enough to you and trust you enough that he can actually share those feelings with you.
Thank you very much, Lars, for the answer, and thank you, Adam, for the brilliant question. There is another question coming up from our colleague Alban. Alban is asking a very difficult question. How do we, or should, measure the success of a successful physiotherapist? And then he says, "Tak tak, thank you," in Danish.
Yeah. So that totally depends on the patient. What is the goal of the patient, and did we actually help them get to their goal in the most effective and efficient way? So basically, if the goal is to actually be able to walk without a crane, did we actually make them do this better? Or is it that they actually could start playing golf again without low back pain? Or could we make them decrease the pain so that they actually can play without having too much pain? Sometimes we can't all of a sudden go from having pain to being pain-free, but the goal could be a pain reduction. But also, it could also be, okay, we can't do so much about the pain. It is there, and it has been there for a long time. And maybe it could be due to nerve injury or something. And then we actually could take another hat on, and we could actually say, well, okay, how can we help you succeed and increase the quality of life you have with the pain? So sort of taking a more act approach. So not only going for, often physios go directly towards the pain, but they forget the disability that comes with pain. So there are some great papers that actually state that it's the problem. The main problem is not actually the pain. The main problem is what follows with the pain. So the disability that comes with the pain is the problem. All around it. So Tamar Pinkus, I did a course with her some years ago. She has some great papers, but she actually did her PhD thesis on different schemas, different mental constructions that we have about ourselves. And in her thesis, she found that there's no mental schema that is not affected when you live with chronic pain. Basically, a schema is a mental representation of ourselves, meaning that I have a mental representation of how I am as a father, as a physiotherapist, as a boyfriend, as a colleague, as a tennis player, as a former martial artist, as a former doorman. So all those are sort of making my personality, but none of those schemas, in her study at least, were not affected by having pain. But we can work a lot with these schemas, even if we have pain. So I recently actually had a patient where this was quite clear when you looked at it, that she stopped doing anything that she actually liked. Basically, she set her whole life on pause because of her problems. She didn't do anything she liked. She had 3 things she really liked to do in her life. She stopped all of them and totally sort of almost imprisoned herself due to her problems. And that's not fun. That's not a good life. That's not, at least it was not she didn't feel it was a good life. Because she didn't choose it herself. It was her problem that totally dictated her life. And we as health professionals can have a huge impact on helping people get better.
It's so important, Lars, because we tend to think that the problem of pain is pain, but the problem, as you rightly said, the problem of pain is way beyond the pain intensity, and is the quicksand of fear, anxiety, depression, of disability, of sufferance in which the person sinks. And I see these when I often see people, they come for other problems, and in the past medical history they have history of back surgery, and they tell you that the surgery has been very successful because the pain is not there as it was a few years ago. But then if you do a careful examination, or if you dig a little bit deeper, you find out those people are still trapped in the same quicksand they were before. They don't ball, they don't do the things they love anymore, they don't bend, they live in fear. And how long before something similar comes back and hit them again?
Or they, even worse, it never comes back. But they let their life be dictated by the fear that it might come back. That's really, think about not doing what you love and you want to do it for 20 years because you think that you had a discus prolapse and you are fearful that it will return, and that will be so painful that you can't do anything. And then the fear of pain itself will rule you more than the pain. And that's a huge problem.
Absolutely. And again, it's so difficult for us physiotherapists to move from the focus, and to help our patients to do this shift from focus to function. And that's why I like the framework of acceptance commitment therapy, because it teaches you, it gives us the tool to make this shift, to shift from symptoms to life, to function, to quality of existence. But again, as we said before, it takes a lot of self-questioning and being a devil's advocate, as you said, to do this. Lars, I'm aware of the time. I don't want to waste too much of your time that you kindly sharing with us all. I was wondering, do you have time for one more quick question?
Yeah, no problem.
So this question is related to another great blog post that you wrote. This was more recent, it was May 2020. And another great blog post on a controversial topic is against the use of clinical experience. Can you tell us a bit more when clinical experience is of value and when it can get on the way of delivering the best treatment for our patients? I think we talked a little bit about it already, but is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, so first I need to mention that I think clinical experience is of great value. Really, the skillful clinical reasoning of a clinician is a huge part of making people get better. So really, the skillful application and research-informed clinical reasoning can really be a tremendous part in people getting better. But it's actually almost easier to state when clinical experiences have low value. And basically my whole point about clinical reasoning is not that it not has any value. It clearly has a lot of value. But there's one instance when it doesn't have as high value, and that is in finding causal inference, meaning finding causal relationships. So basically, and sadly, we can't not tell if our interventions work just from clinical observations and experience. That's actually, this is really necessary to understand that we can't do that as in clinic. The tables are turned against us. There's way too high a risk of errors in doing that. And that's basically one reason why we need research. But if we think we can do what research does in the clinic, then of course we don't need research. And that's actually what a lot of physios and health practitioners think. And this is really so sad. But because research, we need research. It's really the most, as I mentioned before, it's the most humanistic act we can do. That's to use research. Use the highest quality, objective information that we have to better the care of our patients. But it actually comes back to it's sort of, I've been argued and talked about that we need to learn more about epistemology in university. So it's basically, we need to understand that there are more and less reliable and trustworthy ways of get to know something. There is basically more and less reliable ways to get to know if an intervention in fact has an effect. And as soon as we're talking about a specific effect, we need to look at research. Clinical experience is by default a much less trustworthy way of get to know something than a well-conducted research study. That's not to say that clinical experience is automatically wrong, but it's much more prone to errors. That's why we can't only rely on our experience. There's way too high of risk of us being making an error, and there's numerous cases in the medical literature, actually very scary cases of the medical literature, where people have gone with their clinical experience and it has been shown to be wrong. One of the scariest instances is with what is called sudden infant death syndrome, where a very prominent clinician, he actually talked against what the research stated, and that could have saved up against 10,000 dead babies if we have looked at the research compared to trusting a clinician's experience. So basically, and actually, when I think about clinical experience, I like to use the definition by O'Donnell, And he defined that's a long time ago. I think it was in the 70s or something. He defined clinical experience as making the same mistake with increasing confidence over an impressive number of years. So it's making the same error again and again and again, but you're getting more and more confident in your errors. And really,
confirmation bias, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And I really feel that in a modern clinician in the 21st century, we should use research to better the quality of our treatments and also to safeguard ourselves from falling prey to what is called the therapeutic illusion, which is believing that our interventions actually have an effect without knowing it. So, and we as humans, and we talked about this earlier, have a tendency to overestimate the effects of our actions. And we have a tendency to infer causality, cause and effect, where none exist. And this is in medicine called the therapeutic illusion. And if we fall prey to the therapeutic illusion, it can result in inappropriate tests, unnecessary treatments, and often also a lot of low quality interventions.
Thank you so much, Lars, for your time. It's been fantastic. You reinforced my biases towards you. Thank you very much. And
You're welcome.
how can people follow you? Where can people follow you? How can they get in contact with you? And how can they learn from you?
Yeah, so basically they could go to my website, larsavemarie.com, and like you stated earlier, there's a lot of articles there. I try to post regularly. Right now I have been busy with work, so I haven't posted so much. And they can also follow me on social media. Sadly, I've reached my friend limit of 5,000, so you can't become friends with me. Not that I don't want to, but you can't. But you can always follow me, and then I post almost daily. Right now, I've sort of here in December and November, I've tried to take it a bit back from social media, but in the new year, I will start posting daily again. So they can also follow me on Facebook.
Thank you very much, Lars, again, and thank you all for listening to us and sacrificing your Saturday night, afternoon, or Sunday morning, depending from which part of the world you are listening to us. Thank you very much for being here. I encourage you, if you're not done yet, to put just a like on our page, on our social medias, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, so you can be updated with these very interesting talks we are doing and will carry on doing over the next years, and on many other news and that will come up over the next months. So thank you very much all, and have a good rest of the day or beginning of the day. Bye.
Bye.